Santorin is back. Playoffs are upon us. We got some drama with 100 Thieves starting their academy squad. A lot of TSM fans not happy with it. I think rightfully so. We've got all pro team votes to talk about. And then, of course, preview the actual playoffs. There is so much to get into. We're even going to do a little segment to say goodbye to FlyQuest and CLG. JNT 250 and Blue Jay. JNT, okay, let's start off with the 100 Thieves stuff because there's a lot of different varying opinions on this. Do you want to give people the lowdown of what's going on with it?
Well, basically, for I think it was the third match on Sunday games,
Mm-hmm.
100 Thieves had previously announced that after they officially could no longer gain first seed from TSM, after TSM had won their match on Saturday, 100 Thieves announced that they were going to start their academy players against Evil Geniuses on the Sunday game, which was still somewhat of a pivotal game in terms of playoff seeding for number 3 and number 4, because both EG and Cloud9 had the same number of wins going into Sunday, with EG having the head-to-head record over Cloud9, therefore giving them the third seed over them. And there was a lot of different opinions on Twitter of people talking about, oh, is it like, competitive integrity, if you want to call it, to start your whole academy roster while there's still implications on playoff seedings? And other people have the opinion like, oh, well, like it's too late for Cloud9. Like if they if they wanted the third seed, they should have won more games. And I
Yep.
think it's sort of like I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think 100 Thieves, they can do whatever they want. They were the second seed and they could no longer improve or worsen their seeding.
Yep.
And I think we see this in the past with a lot of LCS teams where if there's a meaningless game, it'll either just become a troll game or a team will start their academy roster. And for it wasn't necessarily needed to be a troll game because for EG they still needed to win the game. But
Yeah.
for 100 Thieves, it didn't impact them at all. And why play that extra game if you don't want to reveal strategy and considering you might actually play EG later in the playoffs? So I don't know. I think it's totally fine for them to do that. I think it's a little bit confusing that people are like so up in arms about it, especially from teams like TSM or Cloud9 or Team Liquid, teams who do this quite often in the past. So I don't know.
There is so many ways to look at it from in my opinion. Like, okay, you put your TSM lens on, you're like, this sucks. Now I gotta play against either TL or C9, the winner of that. But then if you look at it from C9 and Team Liquid, even they weren't too happy about it either. But that's where I come back for TSM, or excuse me, for Cloud9 and TL. I don't think they could be as mad as TSM because to your point, well then you should freaking win and get your seed. Like you don't have anything to argue for. Not to mention they would probably do the same thing. But then I look at it from the point of Dignitas, which I haven't heard anybody look at it from their point of view yet. They're probably going, well, I mean, we're a long shot, but hey, I'll take it, right? Like if you're Dignitas, you're probably going, okay, EG's a tough opponent, but if we can upset them, we probably have the best chance of up like you I think for Dignitas, their best chance of making worlds is beating 100 Thieves, not TSM right now, right? So that's something that I think has kind of been lost in the sauce, if you will, is the point of view from Dignitas, just because so many people, rightfully so, have kind of just counted them out, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like on top of that, like I think Dignitas would much rather play EG than C9, uh, because Dig was 0-5 against C9 in the head-to-head in spring and summer, and consistently they got stomped by Cloud9 every single game. Where at least against EG, they didn't go 0-5, and they didn't look like a complete shit show in those games. But the other thing that I didn't really think of up until very recently, when we were looking at the playoff bracket, and then there was also a lot of drama about the format, um, in that 100 Thieves most likely were going to be playing EG in their first round of the playoffs after the first round bye. And that was like another reason why, well, there's no point in playing this game because we're probably going to play them in the playoffs no matter what. And you don't want to
And
give
so you
away
don't
like
want to
draft
show your hand.
strategies or
Yeah.
game plan or anything like that. So that was something I hadn't really thought about, that, while it was still a possibility that they would play them later in the playoffs, it's actually the most likely case scenario because of the non-dynamic seeding. It's just a set bracket.
Yeah, yeah, and that's totally fair. The one thing that I will say, and I mentioned this on Hotline League because I talked a little bit about this on Hotline League tonight. The one thing that I'll say is that for so many years we've heard players a million times mention that stage games they learn a lot more than they do in scrims, and so you would kind of think like this is a valuable stage game, especially for a team that's slumping and needs to kind of find their own. Like 100 Thieves has not been clean the last week or two. They were doing everything just fine and then kind of stumbled towards the end. So the argument could be made, I'm not saying it should be made, but the argument could be made that you should want to play that game and try to fix some of the issues that your team is having. But to your point, then you are also showing your hand, or one of your drafts per se, going into your first playoff series. So there's arguments for both sides. And from a fan perspective, I think it sucked because I think that there's actually a chance that EG loses that game, right? The game that matters, there's a chance that EG just loses that to 100 Thieves. And we kind of saw them like just win against a bad team because like it's 100 Thieves Academy,
Yeah,
right? Like
they
they're a
they didn't
decent
look very
academy
good.
team. Yeah, they're a decent academy team, but they are a bad LCS team. You saw their bot lane have a huge lead and they did nothing with it. Like I'm not even just pointing to the bot lane. I'm talking to the whole team. Like they could have said, "Hey guys, we're ahead bot lane. Hey, do we want to prepare a dive bot and play around bot lane? Yeah, let's do that." Like they did nothing. And so I don't know. To me, with the lead that they had in the bot lane, I think an LCS team at least goes for a play to push that lead even further. And obviously, when it's an academy team, you can't really expect that. So I guess my point is you noticed a difference, and for the fans, it just sucks. But like I said before, I don't blame 100 Thieves. You're gonna do what you can do that puts your team in the best situation, and I think that's all they did. And so when I see Jack C9 Jack tweeted out EG playing for third tomorrow and comes up with the ultimate strat, well played. There's a little bit of tongue in cheek there. I think he's a little bit tilted from it, but I think Jack would do the same thing if he was in 100 Thieves.
Yeah, the only other angle that I hadn't really thought of, but Mark did say on Hotline League, which I think actually makes a lot of sense, is that if you don't start your LCS players on the Sunday match, you basically can use that as the day off, and you can
Mm-hmm.
get right into playoffs practice that next day, because you got to sort of balance like, well, is it better practice to play one stage game that takes up an entire day, or have, the stage game be your rest day and then have one extra day of full scrims practice?
Yeah,
I
and
think
that's hard
more,
to say, right?
yeah,
Because it's not obvious. Because what if all the other LCS teams are on break, right? And you can only scrim against a shitty team or something, like hypothetically here.
well, it depends. I mean, if you're a team
Yeah,
that's not looking so hot coming into playoffs, I think you're probably going to want to be foregoing that break day and like try hard.
yeah, yeah. It's totally possible. Yeah. Yeah, really, really interesting stuff. In the end, I don't blame 100 Thieves. I think it sucks, but I don't blame them for what they did. And I think that the people that are salty about it, like I said, I think their teams, their orgs would do the exact same thing. And so here we are. In the end, in the end, I think it sucks. And one of the things, with the other things that Mark mentioned on Hotline, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, so I'm just going to mention it. Is that the reason why they made this change this year is I guess it prevents teams from playing each other again in the lower bracket. So just a flashback to last year, Golden Guardians ended up playing TSM twice, right? They beat them in the upper bracket and then lost to them in the lower bracket, which, Golden Guardians was a little bit salty about because they had already beaten TSM. You could easily make the argument that TSM learned from the first series and then beat them in the second series. And so I guess the idea of this switch and locking the bracket the way it is avoids teams replaying each other, or so it has been explained to me.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a understandable point as to why that they did this.
Yeah,
Although, I mean, it is a bit of a special case scenario where that did happen.
yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense because, while probably our opinions is that we would just rather see a good series, the average viewer or fan cares about, watching an exciting series and a new series, not one they had just watched 1 week ago.
Yeah, to me, I'm kind of indifferent. Like, do you remember the GGS and TSM series the second time around? It was a good series, right?
Yeah, I know the Golden
That,
Guardians looked like it was going to 3-0 again, and then TSM pulled the reverse sweep, and FBI
yes.
inted at the end of the game. It was great.
Yeah, so that yeah, sad. So that didn't bother me that much, but I mean, I guess it bothered a lot of people, so they wanted to make that change. If you ask me my opinion, even after learning why they did it, I still think it's a bad change, but I'm a lot less upset with it because I see why they did it. Like I understand it, but I don't agree with it. Whereas, I mean, when we first heard the news of what was going down, I couldn't understand. I was pure tilt. I was like, this makes no fucking sense. Finding out this makes me a little bit more acceptable to it. But I mean, it's still like I think the first seed should have something over the second seed, and in this case, it doesn't necessarily seem like that's the case. I mean, it is and it isn't. Theoretically, I don't know. Theoretically, the third team should beat the sixth seed, and therefore you should be avoiding the third seed if you're TSM. But we know that doesn't necessarily work that way. If Dignitas upsets EG, 100 or TSM is going to be really pissed.
Yeah,
But yeah,
like
you can
that's
argue all day about how likely that is.
yeah. I mean, that's the worst case scenario is that Dig manages to upset Evil Geniuses, and then
Yeah.
100 Thieves being the lower seed of the two teams receiving the first round bye gets to play the quote unquote worst team from presumably the winner of C9 versus Team Liquid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any other thoughts on this, J&T, or do we want to hop over to all pro stuff?
Yeah, we can move over to our all pro teams. I assume these are the first of the LCS awards that are going to be rolled out throughout the summer playoffs. That's how it's normally been done in the past. There's not really been an announcement on when they're going to come out, but we're just kind of following last year's format. And if they do give out the All Pro teams this weekend, then you will get to see what we think it should be in advanced.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna hold our rookie of the. Well, I don't even know. Do they announce rookie of the split or the? I guess it would be of the year now. Do they announce that one as well?
I would assume they do because they made the change to not do Rookie of the Split and just do Rookie of
Sorry,
the
sorry.
Year.
Do they announce it the first week? Is what I meant.
I mean, it could be. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I
But
didn't really think
anyways,
about that, to be honest.
yeah, we know that we're gonna leave our MVP talk for later because they normally do that in finals.
Yeah,
That we're
MVP's
pretty
last.
sure about. So we're not gonna do MVP talk this week. We'll save that for another episode. J&T, where do you want to start? Get us going on this one.
Well, we'll just read it out quickly for any audio people who can't see what's on the screen, obviously. For myself, my first team was Fudge, Closer, Jizuke, FBI, and Huhi. My
Okay.
second team was Huni, Spica, Abadage, Danny, and Ignar. And my
Okay.
third team was Impact, Blabber, Ablaze Olive, Lost, and Sword Art.
Okay. Interesting. Uh, I guess the my first thought. So should I go? Should I name mine or what?
We can just talk about mine if you want.
Sorry, say that again.
We can just talk about mine.
Okay. So your first one is Fudge. I guess that's where the discrepancy is for me that you have Fudge number one. I don't think that there's anything wrong with putting Fudge number one, honestly. This seems to be the one where it's the closest through 1 and 3 from what I could hear from people. It sounds like everyone's got Huni Fudge Impact. I mean, we'll have to wait and see because there are a lot of times there's a lot of troll votes, but that seems to be the one where there's a really close race, if you will, between all of those. Um, why did you go Fudge over Huni?
Um, I, the main thing that my main reasoning for going Fudge over Huni is just because I thought Fudge was performing at his best more often than Huni was, but I think the argument can also be made that Huni was performing better than Fudge in those like instances. Like I think Huni had much more like 10 out of 10 games than Fudge did, but I think
Higher
Fudge
highs and lower lows? Is
well,
that what?
I don't even think Huni had low lows this season. I thought he had a great season to be honest, but I just thought that Fudge was a little bit more consistent. Like if you were to give both like I think there's a completely fair argument to say if you were to give these both a score out of 10, they both could have been a 9, but for example, Fudge would have just had like a lot of 9s, whereas Hooney probably had like a couple like some 10s and then some 9s, some 8s, some 7s. I just felt that Fudge's performances were much more consistent. Although I think Hooney did have some better pop-off games specifically against Fudge. I think it was just clear from the get-go, or not even from the get-go, just this whole split that Hooney's Jace is actually like insane. Like
Yeah,
while NA Jace is still a meme and should be a meme, Hooney does not fit into that category because I think his
yeah,
Jace is actually really, really good. I think he does a great job of just getting your 10 to 20 CS lead in the lane and getting your turret plate leads like you should. And any good Jace should be able to do that. But where he really like shines on the champion is creating pressure through the split push, constantly shoving out waves and then roaming to team fights or communicating well with TSM, dancing around objectives or slow playing team fights and allowing him to do stuff in the side lane and get towers.
yeah. So what I'm thinking is, I know you listed all of yours, but I think it's probably better that we do it this way, where we just go lane by lane for our listeners. Because if you can't see all of it, like it's just a bunch of names jumbled in your head, right? So just to be clear, you went Fudge Huni Impact, correct?
Yeah.
So I went Huni Fudge Impact. And I guess the reason why I went Huni is because I thought the whole split, Huni was constantly not getting recognition when he was 1v9ing a game. There was a couple of times that people were like, yo, this was Huni's game. But there were so many other times that like I thought Huni had great games, and it just felt like he was 1v9ing games, and you wouldn't hear any talk about how it was Huni that won that game. That's what I couldn't believe. And so for me, I had to put him ahead, even though I felt bad for Fudge because I think most people would agree that Fudge was the best player on C9 this split, and he was playing with what was very obviously subpar performances in all of his other lanes. But that doesn't mean that your performance was better. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though I think Fudge was in the tougher situation, I still thought Huni looked better, and so that's why I went Huni. And to your point, his Jace was insane. The Impact one, though, I went Impact, and I think a lot of people are going to, but I just want to remind people that at the start of the split, Impact was running it down. And I thought that he looked really solid after, I want to say it was week 3. He started to look really solid. And to me, like, this third all team pro for Impact was kind of like a big comeback after how poor he was performing to start the split.
Yeah, honestly, I definitely agree with that because I think people have kind of forgot that he was playing really terribly at the start of the split. Like, I remember I saw a tweet from Dom today, and he was saying how like Impact should be in the MVP discussion. And I was like,
Mm,
that is completely ridiculous.
sorry, man.
And then his next sentence was like, he's been nothing but good the whole split long. I was like, well, that's just
Mm-mm-mm.
completely not true because his set this whole split was absolutely garbage. And where I think he had like, I think he averaged like five or six deaths per game on set. He had a bunch of terrible set games where he was getting absolutely clapped in lane and dying a ton in like weak side gameplay, which is normally his forte, is like surviving in the weak side and kind of being a sponge. And he was just basically dying to every gank when he was playing set early on in the season. But I do think that his performances from kind of what you said, like week 4 onward, were just really, really good. And I think he
Mhm.
slowly climbed his way back. And he's right now at the form where like your normal like again, like people might throw question marks at Impact because you could say like, oh, Fudge and Huni are playing, really, really good, and maybe Impact's not at that level, but it just feels like Impact has reached that level where I don't need to be worried about him anymore going into playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I definitely agree.
Other people
I
might
can't
be,
believe.
but I'm like he's playing good enough to where you don't need to worry about him, and if you are worried about
Yeah.
EG, it's going to be in other roles.
Yeah, it's weird that Dom tweeted that or said that or whatever it was. That kind
Yeah,
of
actual
surprised me.
terrible
The thing
take.
is, I don't. Yeah, the thing is, I don't like. I'm not outraged by it because like you and I know that it's hard to remember everything that happens in a split when we're making our own lists here. I'm just surprised that he would go out and say something with such confidence. It
Well,
sounds where like it's just not really the case.
I mean, just to if I were to put myself in his position for a little bit, like it's probably easy to forget his bad start to the split because he also does like fully watch 2 other regions as well, and
Yes.
sometimes you can get a little lost and like, because dude, that guy's probably watching like so many games of League on the daily and on the weekly.
Dude, that happens to me, and I don't even like I don't watch all of LPL like he does. I watch like I don't know, half of LCK games and I would say most of LEC, and it happens to me. I'm sure he's watching way more than I am, and so it's hard for me to blame him when I know that stuff happens to me. But the last thing I'll say on Impact is that he got gapped by FlyQuest Licorice.
Yeah,
I'll remind people of that. Like
that was one of
FlyQuest
his
Licorice
terrible
was
set
cooked.
games.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that's one game, but like that just gives you an idea of where he was at the start of the split versus the end. But anyways, Impact solid. I agree with you. Don't really got to worry about him too much. Yeah, he was also really, really good in spring as well. So there's that. Let's go jungle now. We'll go roll by roll. Who do you got? 1, 2, 3 in the jangle.
So I had Closer 1, Speaka 2, and Blabber 3.
Oh, how dare you put Spica behind closer?
Okay.
I did the same. But a lot of people so I personally I I think there's going to be a lot of people that are upset with Spica being behind closer because I feel like there was way too many people that were like this last weekend's going to decide it all. And maybe if Spica absolutely won behind all these games, but I didn't really feel that's the case. Now I do think that closer didn't look that great in his game. I will say that. But I didn't think that specifically the TSM versus 100 Thieves game, I thought that was a lot more of closer just making bad decisions than it was Spica outplaying him. Because I remember Closer could have just ran through mid lane and gotten to his red buff in time. Instead, he tried to take a path where he wasn't spotted. But it's like, it doesn't matter. You're Olaf. Like, just get there and like you will be fine. But he got there late. He lost his buff, and then all of TSM rotated. To me, that was like a team play versus a Spica play. So I don't know, just little things like that. I think Spica was great. I think he is in the MVP talks. I think he should be in the talks for first team All Pro. But if you look at the whole split, man, you can't just suddenly forget that Closer was 1v9ing at the start of the split.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing for me, I do think 1 and 2 is very, very close. I think,
Yeah.
honestly, it's a bit of a 51-49 type of situation. I think you could put either one, 1 or 2, and I could completely agree with your argument and hear out, your reasoning for that. But my main reason for ultimately going with Closer over Spica is because when at the times the teams were performing badly, so for example, at the start of the split when TSM wasn't looking so hot, not the first week, but kind of like the second and the third week after they had kind of fallen from first down to third, like Spica wasn't playing very well and he wasn't having a lot of early game impact, and that was something that we talked about. Whereas Closer, when 100 Thieves really started to slump towards the end of the split in the last 3 weeks, like he was the one guy on 100 Thieves that was like consistently still playing at a high level and was still carrying games. Like his situation is kind of similar to FBI's situation last season or last split, sorry, where 100 Thieves was hitting a hard drop off, but it did feel like FBI was like the only guy like continuing to play very, very well, and that's kind of how I saw it with Closer. Like in the 100 Thieves wins in like a couple of these final games, like Closer was like absolutely 1v9ing on these games. His Olaf, I think, has been really, really good. I think the game that they just had against TSM, where he did get clapped up playing the Olaf, I think I would agree with you that it was more of a team gap and in that early game than it was like Spica making some insane play. I think you got to really credit Sword Art a lot in that game because I think Sword Art has also been playing really, really well.
Yep.
But I just think in the spots where the teams were performing bad, Spica was what I would consider a reason why TSM was performing badly, whereas Closer was like one of the only reasons that 100 Thieves was still performing somewhat decent.
Yeah, I could see that argument. So just to recap, you went Closer, Spica, Blabber. I went Closer, Spica, Xerxes. So let's talk about the difference between Xerxes and Blabber. Why did you go Blabber?
I don't know. I think Blabber got a bit of a bad rep most of the split. I think I'm not going to discount the super int plays that he had early on in the split. They were
Mhm.
int and they were bad. But I think a lot of people are still holding on to this idea that Blabber is just only this guy who ints at Scuttle Crabs and are completely ignoring a lot of the insane performances that he's had throughout this split. I
Which
don't,
would be far more lately, right?
yeah,
As of late.
well,
Yeah.
honestly, I wouldn't even say lately. I would say since
Okay.
about week 4 or 5.
Okay.
I think he had a pretty he had a pretty lackluster first 3 weeks of the season. But ever since then, I think he's been playing much, much better. And I think, similar to 100 Thieves, Cloud9's problems existed elsewhere at the time, specifically mid lane and bot lane. But I just think I don't know, he's just been summarized by these into crab plays. And I think you really got to go back and look at the season. And he's actually been playing some really great games. I think Xerxes was like the other guy that I had close to my top 3, and I did actually have him earlier on in the split. But I think, his play, not to say has fallen off, but I think it's gotten a little bit weaker. But I also think that that's due to Immortals really struggling recently.
And that's the reason for me why I have Xerxes there. So I don't know exactly where I would put Blabber, but it wouldn't be top three. Because I do think that when you have even if it is 3 weeks, let's say that's a significant amount of the split. To be hard running it down. It's not like it was like, oh well, he wasn't great early on. It's like, no, he was really bad. So that's why I couldn't go with Blabber. I don't even think I considered Blabber for top three. But I will say to your point, I do think that he hasn't gotten some of the credit for how he's looked as of late. But I don't think I would put him in the All Pro. I went with Xerxes because I think that he's literally the reason this team wins games, and I've mentioned that before on this podcast. So I don't think people are going to be really surprised when they hear me say that. Yeah, I think Insanity has fallen off really hard, which is sad to see. He lost some of his
Yeah,
juice.
he
Um,
needs a refill.
that guy needs the juice, man. Um, I will say that I think their bot lane is performing better, so maybe I didn't give Immortals bot lane enough credit, but I still saw them throw way too many leads more towards the start of the split, and I just don't think that Revenge really wins many lanes whatsoever. And so, I mean, it's Xerxes to me is the reason that they're getting these wins, and he's where the advantages are coming from. So to me, it was easy him. And then, like we mentioned before, Closer and Speaka very close, could go either way, but you and I went Closer.
Yeah, honestly though, I think that apart from what I would consider the top four, being Closer, Speaka, Blabber, and Xerxes, I think there's a pretty steep drop off for the next candidates because I think, I think Closer and Speaka are kind of like a level above the rest right now. And then for me, I had Blabber and Xerxes in that tier right below, and I ultimately did go with Blabber. Maybe a little bit recency bias, I'm not going to lie, because I do think Blabber's been playing really well as of late, and I think Xerxes hasn't been playing as well as he was before. But like I said, I think, maybe I'm attributing that to Immortal's poor performances. But I do think that Xerxes has been playing well. I think if you take Xerxes
Yeah.
off this team and you insert average LCS jungler, this is probably team maybe doesn't even make playoffs. Maybe they're just like ninth.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I can definitely agree with that. It'd be interesting because FlyQuest and CLG are quite bad at the moment, but Immortals could have been pretty freaking bad without Xerxes. Let's go mid lane. I went Jizuke, Abadage, Power of Evil. Who did you go?
I went Jizuke, Abadage, and a Blaze Olive.
Okay, so let's just start with the obvious two. We knew that it was Jizuke and Abadage. I think everyone's gonna have them 1 and 2, right?
Yeah,
Is there anybody that comes close? I don't think so.
no, it's not
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. So I don't know about you. Okay. Okay. Yes, I should have. Let's get Jizuke and Abadage first. So the start of the split, much like Impact, Jizuke was freaking running it down at the start of the split, and things did not look quite very good for EG. However, as the split went on, Jizuke is 1v9ing these games. Maybe 1v9ing is not totally fair, but hard carrying these games, let's say. He was
Yeah,
absolutely stomping all of his lanes and side lanes. You couldn't answer him. He had pressure all over the place, whether it be on his rise or his TF. Jizuke was really, really good, and I think he deserves to be talked about more for the MVP than Abadage, quite honestly. And so I had to go him over Abadage.
yeah. I don't know. It just feels like Abadage kind of fell off in terms of like the impact he was having on games. It felt like through the first, I want to say 5 weeks of the season, just the game just revolved around Abadage. If he was playing a supportive style champion, he was following his jungler around the entire map and making plays. If he was playing an assassin, the team was playing around him and they were doing everything possible for him to have a stable lane and get kills around the map. And if he was playing a control mage, it was 100 Thieves' job to slow the game down and allow him to scale. But it kind of just felt like he just went on to like Silas duty at a certain point into the season because he just started playing a ton of Silas and just not being like a huge contributor to the team. Like I don't know, I don't think he was playing bad by any means, but it just felt like, my main reason for going Jizuke over him ultimately was like it just felt like Jizuke was the whole reason why EG made this surge from weeks 4 onward, and Abadage just completely like fell into the background in terms of the game plan of 100 Thieves.
Yeah, and Abadage was the clear favorite for MVP within the first 3 weeks. He was absolutely styling on everyone. And as a reminder, it was easier for him to stand out when he replaced Amante, who they were struggling a lot with in spring, right? So it was like night and day. This guy comes in, and this team looks like one of the best teams, or not even one of. They looked like the best team in the league for the first 3 weeks. And so everyone's pointing to this guy as like an early MVP favorite. He came out the gate, but then to your point, he kind of fell off as the weeks went on. The one thing where I think I differ from you a little bit is where I don't know exactly, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something like you said you didn't think he was playing bad or something like that. Whereas like there were some games to me that I did think he was just playing bad, like
Well, I meant more like
face
overall,
checking
like
things, face checking, and like really not, honestly, being lazy, not being respectful of where other like where the enemy could be. So many times he died just face checking brushes, and like to me, that's just bad. Whether it's bad because you're just like, I hope he's not in here, or it's bad because you're not communicating with your teammates as to where he could be. Uh, Either way, it's a problem. You can't just die like that, face checking brushes, and it was happening a lot. And so that to me was quite bad, and that was just, I don't know, took away from his pogginess, if you would.
yeah, I just felt like overall it's not like he was playing terribly. He just wasn't as flashy and as good as he was towards the start of the split, and it just kind of felt like
Yeah.
they were doing their trajectories were kind of going in the opposite direction as the season went on.
Yeah. Okay, and then Power of Evils, who I had in the third spot, and you had a Blaze Olive. This one's gonna be, I think that one's a little bit spicy. Although you've mentioned before on the show that like you think Olive should be up there in the All Pro voting, so our regular listeners won't be surprised by that. Yeah, why Olive over any other mid laner?
I just similar to Xerxes, I'm kind of on the same like train of thought as you with Xerxes. I just don't think he's getting the credit he deserves. And if you really take a look at this team, I think Ablazov is one of the main reasons why Golden Guardians was winning a lot of their games, specifically early on in the season. He was legit hard carrying games. He was the primary carry for his team in the majority of their early wins into split. And I think later on in the split, he was doing a ton of innovation in the mid lane with like cool champion picks like the Tom Kench mid, the Callista mid. He was still playing at a pretty good level for the majority of the split. I think that his ending was wasn't as amazing as a start, but I think similar to how you view Xerxes with Immortals is how I view Blaze Olive with Golden Guardians. And should you insert, I wouldn't even, it's hard to say insert average LCS mid laner because I think a Blaze Olive is an average LCS mid laner, but I think the role that he plays for his team elevates his play and makes him a better player.
Well, and the weird thing with Olive is that like he came into the league in spring not supposed to be a bottom tier mid laner in the LCS. And so maybe I don't agree with him being top 3, but I definitely agree that he is at least middle of the pack, and that is something in itself which is really really crazy because this has been a guy that's been sitting in academy for quite some time now. And so it's nice to see a player like that come up to the LCS. And even though I would say he struggled in spring, really turn it around in summer and start to be an actual threat. To your point, he played a bunch of different stuff and performed on it, and that's something that's really really valuable in any league. However, there were games that I just don't think that he had a lot of influence on, and he was running it down every once in a while. Nothing out of the ordinary. Again, like it wasn't like he was running it down on the regular. I think everyone has games where they run it down every once in a while. But to me, still not enough consistency to put him in the top 3. I went with Power of Evil, but I will admit I had a hard time picking the third player here. I went with PoE just because even though we saw him be quite disappointing on things like Lucian, well, just things that aren't generally mages, to me, it felt a lot like TSM was trying to put him on things to try to widen his champ pool. And whenever he went back to those mages, you saw the regular PoE that you would expect to see, where he's absolutely styling on them. He had that one really good Azir game that stood out to me. And I don't know, I guess when I think of that, I just think of Power of Evil always being a solid mid laner that you could rely on. Do I think he was like to the playing to the level of a third best mid laner? Not really, but I don't think anyone was. And so that's how I guess he just kind of slid in third by default for me.
Yeah, I think Power of Evil has been getting better over the course of the split, and I do think that's partly because TSM isn't putting on these quote unquote experimental picks like the Lucian, like the Lee Sin, like the Viego after it got nerfed because he did pick up a really early win on Viego, like at the start of the split when the champion was like OP Giga broken. But I still am of the opinion that Power Evil is TSM's worst performing member. Not to say that he's performing badly, just that I think all the rest of the TSM players are more important to the team and are performing better than him.
Yeah,
Um,
you mentioned that last week. That's still that surprises me still. Because I would say Sword Art wasn't that great at the start of the split as well. I mean, Sword Art lately, yeah, I think he's way better than PoE. But even still, I would take PoE over Lost as well. I don't think Lost does all that much.
yeah, I don't know. I think kind of similar to you. I think third was a bit of a hard decision.
Yeah, it was.
For me it was going to be one of a Blaze Olive, Power of Evil, or Jensen. Um, I don't know. I just went with the Blaze Olive. I think in a perfect world where the role that he played on Golden Guardians, if he was on a better team, I think like should he have to fit that same role, he would still be like a great player on that team.
Yeah. And one other quick thing that I want to point out just while we're talking about mid laners before we move on to the ADCs, no perks on here, and I know some people are going to be surprised by that. I'm just going to throw it out there. Didn't even think about him. It
Nah,
wasn't even close.
if you think Perks deserve to be on an all pro team this split, you weren't watching the games.
Yes, and that's just to. I don't want people to be like they didn't even mention perks, not even close. Yeah, that honestly, not even close. He had
If
a bad split, and we're not counting him out. We always said it a million times. I'll say it again. We know that he can perform in playoffs, and we're still not counting him out. But if this is an all-pro team for regular split, a regular season rather, and no, not even close. So just something I thought needed acknowledgement in case people are wondering why we're not even talking about perks.
Yeah, I would have taken all of these mid laners we just mentioned plus Jensen before I would have taken perks in this all
Yeah,
pro list.
yeah, which is weird because that probably puts him bottom half. Does that put him like 6 or lower?
Yeah, puts him at
Yeah,
6.
pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. Anyways, let's go 80 carries. I struggled with this one the most because I knew it was FBI at the top, and then I didn't know where to go from there. I went FBI Tactical Danny. Where did you go?
I did FBI, Danny, and Lost.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really, I don't know what to say. I think my list for 80 carries sucks, but I don't know what other way to do it. I wasn't impressed with really any of the 80 carries that weren't FBI. There were some games where I thought Danny was insane, but then there were some games that I thought he was kind of useless, and there was a lot of lanes that he lost as well. I don't know. I'm excited for Danny because he's a young player, and I think maybe he's getting a little bit overrated by some because it's just an exciting new player. But I do not think that he was number two, but I guess I put him in number three.
Yeah, I don't know. This was also hard for me, mainly the third spot, because I just think Sven didn't meet the game quota to qualify for this for me. Like
I would also
missing.
say that Sven wasn't that great until more recently as well. But again, he was on break, right? It takes time for you
Yeah.
to get back to your. Anyway,
Yeah, it's weird because I just thought it was hard to place. Like I think the AD carry play for the most part has actually been pretty good this split. Like I thought there's been a lot of AD carries, even the bottom ones that have been performing better than they have in the past. The main two I would throw out there are Raze and Stixay. I think both of them have been playing a lot better than they did in the past as of late. Obviously, I don't think they're anywhere near like all pro level, but I do think that for the most part the ADC play has been kind of leveling up from spring to summer. And even at the top end, I think it's still relatively close for the most part. Specifically, when you talk about spots like 2 to maybe 4 or 5, like for me, I think Sven and Tactical, I was kind of on the fence about with the both of them. Uh, with Sven, I just didn't think that he met the game quota because he did miss a whole third of the split. And Tactical, I'll talk about Tactical when we talk about your list. But I do think that Danny was probably the second best AD. I thought EG's bot lane was a really important piece for them to sort of at the beginning of EG's sort of rise to the top. I thought their bot lane was the biggest reason why that was happening, and I think later on in the split, it kind of turned into more Jizuke and Svenskeren and Impact playing a lot better than they had at the start of the split. I think those three players on EG were all having some really terrible games in the first 3-4 weeks of the season, and then we kind of saw, once the whole contract situation came in for jungle, Svenskeren was playing better, Jizuke started playing better, and it kind of like relieved the pressure off of Danny, but I still thought that he was playing at a really good level. So I kind of just
yeah.
kept him at 2. I had him at 2 before, and I just didn't think that he needed to be bumped up or down.
So I totally agree with you in the sense about talking about the bottom part of the league. I actually do think that the 80 carries at the bottom half have actually gotten better, and there were very few just absolute dog shit tier ADCs. Rip Johnson. But yeah, to the point that I was making earlier, it didn't feel like there was anyone that stood out to me as being all that great outside of FBI. And so it was like maybe it was like lower ceiling but higher floor kind of deal when it came to 80 carries. And so I don't really have a strong opinion that tactical should be 2 or Danny should be 3. It's just like anyways, I really struggled with this one.
Yeah, um, honestly, the way that I kind of did it was I felt like that, especially with a lot of the ADC support tandems at the top of the league, I actually would argue that the ADC wasn't as impactful as support was across almost all teams minus 100 Thieves. I think it was like an equivalent.
Yeah.
Epi and Huhi were playing both really insane. But I think in the case of EG's bot lane, I think Ignar was a big reason why Danny was playing so well. And I think
Yep.
Sword Art was a big reason why Lost was playing so well. And I think Vulcan kind of coming online, he was like the second Cloud9 player to sort of return to form was one of the reasons why when Sven sort of got, into like week 6, week 7 was playing as well as he was. So for me, I kind of found like my 80 carry list followed my support list because I thought the
Mm.
supports this season were also just like playing really insane.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Let's get into the support list then. I went Hu He, Ignar, and Core JJ. And who did you go?
I did Hui, Ignar, Sword Art.
He, Ignar, Sword Art. Okay. So I think that if the split had gone on for another 2 or 3 weeks and things continued the same, I probably would have considered Sword Art above Core JJ. But I don't think that he was anything all that special towards the start of the split. I mentioned that just a little bit ago. Despite the fact that I've been really impressed with Sword Art lately, it is a full split award, and for me, I just didn't see enough out of him out the gate, and so I guess I just didn't think that he deserved to be on there.
I guess
Core
well,
JJ
I
is
just want to interrupt you real quick because what I would
go
say
ahead.
to that is I think there are other examples on both of our lists where that was also the case, where a player was not playing well at the start of the split, like players like Impact, Spica, or Jizuke. But I kind of would put Sword Art in that category because I think his improvement throughout the split has been so good where it is warranted for a third team spot. Because like right
So
now, I completely agree with you. I think if Split went along further, I think Sword Art could even be number two. Honestly, I think could even be number one because I think he's actually been playing that well. But when you do kind of factor in the start of the split, um, you know, Sword Art's there.
yeah, the only place that I differ there is that the names that you compared to, I think you said Spica, Jizuke, Impact. I think they've all been far better than Sword Art, in my opinion. Even though I think Sword Art's been impressive, I would definitely say that as those other players have gotten better throughout the split, I think that their improvements were much more than Sword Art's, in my
I
opinion.
would say they're equal, in my opinion.
Yeah. Anyways, that's
Sorry,
I guess
go
where we differ there.
say your core GG.
No, I don't mind being interrupted. That's fine. The thing with Core JJ is like it's so weird to not have him number one, right? Like this is like Core JJ was always number one for so long. It always felt so easy to throw him up there, or at least number two. Whereas like I think we've seen a significant drop off from what was probably the best player in the league for the last couple of years. Um, so it's crazy to me that I have Core JJ 3, and I did consider not putting him on there altogether. Like it was close, right? And I think
Hmm.
that in itself is interesting, and not for good reasons.
Yeah, or was that all you wanted to say?
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
because I just wanted to like go back, if like, because if you look holistically at my list, I think the big omission is I have zero Team Liquid players, and I, my main reason I think for doing that is mainly just how like I think there was a lot of like it was a pretty drama-filled season for Team Liquid with the whole
Yep.
Alfari substitution, with Santorin, not being able to play due to his medical concerns. Glad that he's playing now.
Hmm.
Um, so it was pretty hard to get a read on Team Liquid as they were playing with two subs for the majority of the split. But at the same time, like Team Liquid only won two games against the top four teams in the league, and both of those were
Yep.
against EG. They went 0-3 against Cloud9, they went 0-3 against 100 Thieves, they went 0-3 against TSM, they went 2-1 against EG. And for me, it's hard to make a solid case for any of those players to be the top tier in what I would consider the top three is obviously all pro. It's hard to make a solid case that, hey, if these players aren't performing well against the top of the league, then how can they be top three? And I know it's not as black and
I
white
think
as
that's a
that.
fallacy there because you're looking at the team performance, but this is an individual player award. So
I
that's where I would point to. I think that your jungler was obviously not your starting jungler. Your top was obviously not your starting top, even though I thought Jenkins was actually good for trying to replace the best top laner in the league. I just think we're looking at apples and oranges here.
well,
This is a single player award versus a team, right? There's a reason why I had like Xerxes on here earlier, but like Immortals, not a fucking chance was that team good, right? Versus, I'm sure they probably lost a lot of games to the top team. So
like I
that's
did
what I would
say,
say about that.
it's not as black and white as that. But
Hmm.
I do think even when you look at those games, like they were not like a lot of these games were not close. Like the two wins that they picked up against EG were like the only two games where like these games were close. Like they got smashed by TSM all three games. All three Cloud9 games, they got smashed by Cloud9. I think the only one that you could even consider close was the most recent one on Sunday. And even at that, like if not for Jensen's like great roams on the rest of these plays, like that game ends like in probably 25 minutes because of how hard Cloud9 was like making plays around the map. Like it's I totally get the point where it's not black. it's
Hmm.
hard to say that because it's not it's an individual award, not a team award. But I
Yep.
still think like even individually they weren't matching up to the rest of the league. I think they just didn't have very good performances against, individually against the top teams, but they were smashing all of the bottom teams. Like if you were to ask me, I would put the majority of Team Liquid players probably right at 4. Like a lot of the team TL players would be at 4. Like for me, Jensen's 4, Tackle and Core JJ are 4. And if Alfari and Santorin met the game quota, they would be 4.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. You know what? You know what else I was thinking about when I was making this list or whatever. I remember for past splits thinking like, man, there's 4 players that I want to put in the top 3. And what I struggled with this time around is that it was like, man, for a lot of these, I only have 2 that I want to put up here. And like,
Yeah.
even for ADC, there was only 1 that I wanted to put on the list. And so that was something that kind of worried me when I was realizing, like, man, I don't even want to pick 2 other AD carries because I didn't think anyone was like top 3 worthy. Or even with supports, I guess you could argue that Core JJ isn't really top 3 worthy, but I didn't really think anybody else was. Honestly, there was too much inconsistency, which is not what you want. You should have 3 consistent players in every role for throughout one whole split, right? But I don't really think we got that, and that was something that was really strange.
Yeah, for me it just felt like in some positions, I don't think there really was like a clear cut 1 and 2. Like I think if you look at the lists, there's arguments to be had for Huni and Fudge being 1 or 2, for Closer and Spica being 1 or 2, for Jizuki and Abadage being 1 or 2, for Danny and FBI being 1 or 2, or even for Hui and Ignar, just based off of like how everything played out. And then similar to that, like there's a gap, and then there's 3, 4. So I still think we do have a lot of solid players and players who I do have confidence in, but I just think the way that it played out, with there being like 1, 2, gap 3, 4, made it a bit hard to like make those final decisions.
Yeah. I remember last year, for some reason, specifically thinking of top lane, last year it was like Licorice, Someday, Broken Blade, and Haunter. I remember trying to figure out which 3 I could fit into the top 3. I mean, think about that list, by the way, and how much that has changed.
Yeah.
Like Licorice, Someday, Broken Blade, Haunter. That's kind of a lull right there. But yeah, that's just that's one of the things that stood out when we were doing this time last year was like, wow, these players, some things have changed a lot.
Hmm.
Um, Last thing on the whole thing altogether, did you hear the quote from Fudge on his for his interview with Latigris afterwards?
Where he didn't care about MVP.
Yeah, the quote isn't the direct quote isn't necessarily all that important, but he basically said like he doesn't really care about MVP voting or the All Pro voting, something like that, because he doesn't really care about the opinions of the people who vote. And I on the TriCast with Medios and Double Lift, I don't know if Sneaky was there at the time, but they were saying like, "Whoa, like that's a little bit brutally honest." Uh, I don't really care. I think he's right. Every time there's this all pro list that comes out, man, how many times do we see some votes that are just completely troll? Like way out there. It happens every time. And so I think one of the things that he's kind of saying without actually saying it is like, "Hey, can you guys not let these people that know nothing about the game vote, please?" And I think he's got a good reason to be thinking that. Like
Yeah.
there are people straight up like, okay, Travis Gafford is a perfect example. He has straight up said on his own show, he's like, guys, I'm not really a league expert. Like I just, he likes to make content and try to get people interested in the player. So he will come out and tell you like, yo, I'm silver at League of Legends. Should we really have those kinds of people voting on MVP? Probably not, right?
Yeah, the thing that I think with the whole voting system for LCS, like I feel like it's broken up into 3 groups. There's the third party media, then there's all the Riot employees, and then there's the teams. And I think, there's like a disconnect between all 3 because the third party media people, like you mentioned, you don't really know like what their experience or like level of knowledge of the game is. So quite often there's a bunch of votes that are just completely like absolutely random that don't make any sense. Like if you actually would have watched
Mm-hmm.
these games, these votes don't make any sense. And then you have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the Riot employees, which I feel are probably the most accurate representation of the votes because they're the ones who are normally the experts who are analyzing all of these games on a full-time basis. And then you
Like your
have all the
freaks and azales kind of mean
yeah,
is what
your
you're talking
Freaks, your
about?
Azale, your
Yeah.
Kobe, your Captain Flowers, like those
Yep.
guys. And then you
Yep.
have the teams, and the teams seem to take more of a not necessarily stage game perspective, but like a whole like stage games plus scrims. And And I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of cases and even like quotes and interviews where players from teams or coaches even will say like, well, when we do our all pro voting, we also like have to factor into like scrims because from what we see, like it's not always the stage games. It's what we are seeing also behind the scenes. And it's hard for you to really comment on that and kind of dispute those votes because we're not seeing the full picture. So I think it always, it'll normally not give you an accurate representation of what all the votes is because there is like that disconnect between those three groups of people. I think if you had to pick the most accurate, I would just make it all of the right people. And yeah, your sample
Yeah.
size is very small, but I think that'll give you like the best overall results for
I
what the
agree.
public wants.
It would be more accurate as to who should actually win. I completely agree. That's the way I look at it. I thought it was really funny when like Doublelift was like, "Yeah, he's brutally honest." I'm like, "That's Doublelift is literally like that's what he Doublelift is brutally honest." So I thought Doublelift was going to be like, "Yeah, I love that take. He's right." And I wonder if they're going to have the TriCast vote. That would be appropriate, right?
Maybe.
Having LS Dom and then obviously Sneaky Medios and Doublelift vote. I think that would probably be appropriate.
Yeah.
But
No,
anyways,
I think that would be
that's a
good.
side thought. Yeah, I think that they could add them in as well.
All the
Um,
co-streamers.
anything else, or do we want to move on to stuff?
Yeah, I say we get into our playoff talk.
Okay, before we do that, I just want to remind people to hit the subscribe and the like button if you are enjoying the content. It helps us out a lot. And, well, if you subscribe, you'll get notification or it'll pop up in your feed next time our episodes come out. So remember to do that. Okay, let's get into round one of the playoffs. Game one, I believe, is game one EG Dig?
Yeah, they play Saturday.
Okay, Saturday. At what time? Do we know?
Nope.
Hopefully regular time. Maybe we can look that up as we're talking about it and figure it out. Okay, this is a incredibly one-sided matchup. I think most people would agree with that. Uh, I guess we're not seeing Saligo come back. I'd be really surprised if all of a sudden you make the switch from Yusui back to Saligo.
I mean,
Yeah,
what's there to lose? Like you clearly like
that's one way to look at it. Yeah.
let's be brutal. Let's be brutally honest here. I think Dig has no chance, and I think should they need sh
Uh,
okay,
I give him a little bit of a chance. Come on.
they have a 2% chance. I'll give
Okay.
them that's the maximum allotment I can give Dignitas.
Okay.
But from my like obviously from their perspective, it's probably a very different thought because you have to have confidence in yourself and you're gonna game plan and whatnot. But like at this point, like what do you have to lose? Like, dude, like Yasui is bad. He is bad. Like the whole point of this experiment was by the end of the season, we were going to have two great mid laners. Well, one of them's not great, so let's go with the other one who can potentially be great, or at the very least, play at a decent level, which is what he was doing when he was the actual starter. Because yeah, I think we still both had the opinion that Saligo never should have been subbed out in the first place. And
Yeah.
even if they did want to, find out if Yusui could be good, it was pretty obvious 3 weeks into his time in the LCS.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said there. I will give Dignitas. I don't know. I don't want to give him 2%. I think that that's not totally fair. I'd give him like a 10-15% chance. That I mean that is still a pretty
It's a
significant
lot.
underdog, right? Yeah, that is still a pretty like if you play the series 10 times, you're losing at 9. Like let's be honest, that's still pretty significant. Um, I'm trying to think of where they win though. That's the issue, right? Is
Yeah, like
like
I don't think Dig
we've
has an
been
individual advantage anywhere.
well, so here's the thing. We've seen that EG plays very aggressive, and as Peter Dunn has even said, the more aggressive you play games, the more that there is chance for upsets because there's a lot of volatility and a lot of chance for variance. So that is something that Dig has going for them. However, that's EG's game. Like that's the way they play, and that's their comfort zone is to play very aggro. And so, yeah, you could say that there's more of a chance for variance because EG's hella aggro. That's how they want to play the game. So that's that to me. I have a hard time looking at that and saying that that's a benefit for Dignitas.
Yeah, and I would also say like even though I think EG does like thrive in the aggression, like they're also a pretty good team like playing slow and controlled. I think Jizuke has been much better in the side lane in terms of limiting his deaths while maximizing his side lane impact and drawing members over and constantly pushing in waves and getting side lane towers. Like I think Jizuke's patience in the side lane is what won them that game against Cloud9 on Friday. I think he did a really great job of using the vision to his advantage of showing on TF and porting to side lanes and showing yourself on towers and inhibitors, backing off, hiding in fog of war, and then reappearing when Cloud9 seems to attempt to go take the 4v5 team fight. I think, EG can play a slow and controlled game, and kind of like you mentioned, and I guess what you were alluding to is it's up to EG to lose this series with a bunch of high variance plays. And I don't,
Honestly,
and I,
kinda,
but
yeah.
I don't think that can happen over a 5 game series. I think if this was a best of one, obviously Dignitas has a lot better chance. But like, if let's say EG go out and inst the first game of the series, like they're gonna just like they're gonna like pull it back a little bit. And even if they int game 2 of the series, then they're gonna really pull it back. And I think, even down 2-0, if EG just plays a normal controlled game, they're gonna be Dig. I would say 10 times out of 10 right now in this state.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, right? The other thing that I don't think we can ignore is that they haven't just struggled in mid lane. Like, it's not just a mid diff here; it is an everywhere diff. Fake God has fallen off significantly, I would say, from spring, and Impact, as we mentioned, has gotten better as the split goes on. I don't see Fake God winning any lanes against Impact. That's another problem. And then even in the bot lane, I tried to give Afro and Neo as much credit as possible last split, but I mean, I don't think they've been that great this split, to be quite honest. So I don't think that you have an advantage there either. And it's like, well, where is the advantage? And it's like, I don't really know if there is one. Even if Svenskeren or Contracts is trolling, like, you have the other guy that you could swap to. Even if, like, the only weak part of EG, in my opinion, has been the jungle, and even it hasn't even been that weak for one. And two, you got two options in case it is looking bad. So yeah, I'm worried for Dig. Do we want to do predictions?
Well, the only thing I was going to say for Dig is just to throw some credit their way a little bit, and deservedly so, is I think Acadian's been playing better. I think his first like 3 weeks on the main roster were pretty terrible. He was pretty, what's the word? His gameplay was fairly obvious and easy to predict, and that's why,
Yeah,
he ended up falling super far behind in a majority of games where if his ganks would fail, he'd be behind on his jungle clear and he'd wind up being like down 30 CS in the first 12 minutes of the game. But slowly, he kind of sort of it seemed to figure out his role in the team, and his gank timings got a lot better, and he seemingly was not getting super far behind in the jungle should his ganks not work out, and more of his ganks were working out, and I think
yeah,
he was one of the reasons that Dig kind of flatlined towards the end of the split where they weren't just losing all their games, they weren't winning all of them, they were just kind of like winning and losing and winning and losing. And I think Acadian was a
yeah.
big part of that. But to their point of their bot lane, I don't think their bot lane's been that great. I don't think Saligo can fix them either. So if we're gonna give a prediction, 3-0 EG.
Yeah, 3-0 EG. I mean, I don't have anything else to add. I think Dignitas is in a tough spot, and we'll leave it at that.
Yep.
Because I've said everything I have to say on that series. Let's go C9TL, the next one. I'm pretty excited for this one. Okay, so there's the talk about how TL has not won a lot of games against the upper part of the standings team. So and that's a fair criticism. That is something to be worried about. I thought they still looked pretty good against Cloud9 in the game this weekend. I thought that game was pretty well played from both sides. Um, and you finally have your full roster back. Now, whether it's enough time for you to start looking like a top team again, that's debatable, right? Because Santorin's been out for so long. But at least you have your full roster, and that is something. And I'm really excited for the best of five. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of happy EG got the win against Cloud9, and against 100 Thieves, because I think the C9TL is gonna be hella hype. I'm really excited for that one.
Yeah, I think people continue to underrate the difference between best of ones and best of fives. Best of
Yeah,
fives are a whole different monster than best of ones. It's just really hard to judge the level of teams specifically looking at on a game by game basis when it is a best of one. And League of Legends, obviously, like the dynamic of the game and the little nuances of how a series plays out is so much different in best of fives because there is time to adapt and because there's time to sort of change your game plan and make on the fly changes and decisions. And specifically looking at this series, I do think that it is Cloud9 favored, and they did look a lot better than Team Liquid specifically. They did look a lot better in their games against Team Liquid, but like you mentioned, they only had their main roster for one of those 3 matchups that they had in the summer split. The first one was like early on in week 1 when Jenkins came in and SANTORIN was playing. The second one in the middle, Jenkins and Armeo were playing, and in this last one, Alfari and SANTORIN were playing, and it was SANTORIN's first week back. And I agree with you that I think, both teams actually played pretty well in that game. I think Cloud9 did a whole lot of great work in the early game, making various plays around the map, and Team Liquid also did a really great job of like stemming the bleeding and like plugging all the holes, like until it just came to a point where they didn't have enough hands to plug in all the holes because C9 was being so aggressive with their cross map engages and just pushing the pace of the game.
Yeah, the interesting story about both of these teams is that the start of summer started off pretty bad for both of them because of roster problems, right? Whether it be Sven that was benched or whether it be Alfari that was benched and Santorin with the health issues. Like both of these teams, while they are comparable, they're not totally equal because C9 has had more time to play with their full roster. The comparison is still there that each of these teams are trying to play catch up as the split went on. I just think for TL it's a lot more difficult because theirs is so much more recent, and that's the real struggle with having TL go up against C9 is that I think it's just a harder situation for TL, even though the things are the two situations are similar. TL's is just worse, right? And that's hard to ignore. And so that's why I got to give the edge to C9 as well. I think that I'm going to go 3-2 C9 in this one. I really hope that we see them go the distance again. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, my prediction would be 3-1 Cloud9. I think similar to the previous two series, the X factor is going to be in the top lane and how
Hmm.
Cloud9 deal with Alfari. Because you've mainly mentioned in the past that you think Team Liquid is a little bit one-dimensional in their play, and how a lot of the times this team does look good. It's them playing through Alfari. And for whatever reason, whenever Team Liquid plays Cloud9, Santorin does his best job to avoid Alfari at all costs and just not play around him. Like, dude, I don't know. It's just whenever Team Liquid plays Cloud9, Cloud9 is normally a very mid to bot focused team. Um, like the thing with Cloud9 is basically Blabber almost always paths up to Fudge's side of the map early on into the game. And then after that, Blabber is exclusively playing in his bot side of the jungle, repeatedly farming Raptors and Krugs, and then doing invades on enemy Grump and enemy Raptors in order to get ahead in the jungle, and plays very heavily in the bot side river, kind of swiveling from bot to mid, protecting his lanes, and then taking early dragons. I think Cloud9, since they've been getting better later on in the split, they've kind of gone back to that mid to bot side focused play where they do like to take the first two dragons of the game instead of going for the first Rift Herald, which was kind of what they were doing at MSI and what they were doing early on in the split and forcing a lot of these fights pre 10 minutes. And I think what they've been doing more recently has been a lot better and sort of more similar to their play style back in like spring 2020 as well when Cloud9 was like super, super dominant. But I think if Santorin just chooses to completely ignore top lane at 3 minutes and 15 seconds and let Alfari get dove or let him get pushed off a wave or let Fudge get a good recall timing and basically stabilize the lane as soon as possible, like it's going to be hard for Team Liquid because I don't think that they have, I think the bot lane matchup is even or skewed in Cloud9's favor. I think the mid lane matchup, yes, while Perks has been dying a lot and playing very volatile, I don't think it's in that big of a favor for Jensen. And I just think due to Santorin's limited time back on the main roster, like it's going to be difficult unless Blabber starts running it down again.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Santorin ignoring the top lane. It's something that I hadn't really thought of, and I would have to go back and look at what the drafts look like and where Blabber's starting. You said that he likes to path top a lot against Team
Against
Liquid,
Team Liquid, he
and
paths
and
top every game.
well, and see that's where I'm going with this is that even if you RTL and your plan is to play around top, you can't just do that any game that you want. Like good teams are going to force you to play different ways that you want to play. And so it could be over by draft if that is your only way to win. It could be over by draft if C9 just gets a favorable top matchup, right? It depends. Like draft is something that you need to consider there, and then of course the pathing, like you just mentioned. Like it's not as simple as oh, Alfari's better, so we can just play around top early. Like, it's really not that simple, and that's why I've been saying for the last few weeks, you need to be able to play through multiple lanes it's not even just important just in the early game. It is important in draft as well, because you will be exploited by teams that know what you're trying to do. And that's where I'm a little bit worried for TL. Now, with that said, another thing that I've mentioned is that I still think you can play around Jensen, and I still think you can play around the bot lane. So that's why I'm still giving TL 2 games. I think they are going to recognize that they don't have to, or that they have to play around more than just Alfari, and so that's why I'm not counting them out altogether.
Yeah, I do think that the draft will be very important in this series, and I do think that the one game that Team Liquid is going to win, it's just going to be like a straight up stomp because like
Mhm.
it's just going to be outdrafted. Like the main champs that I'm looking at in the series is I think Aphelios is like sleeper absolute bonkers broken. I think his play rate, his pick rate is starting to kind of, tick up around most of the world, and I think he's being recognized as like a really, really strong pick, especially with this new build that people are going with the lethality max second, and they go for this like collector second kind of burst build, which I think does a fuck ton of damage and is actually really, really good. And I think both Sven and Tactical are really, really good Aphelios players. Cloud9, for whatever reason, hasn't been playing a lot of Aphelios, even though I think Sven's it's one of his best champions all time. Since he, obviously he's only been out since season 10, but when Aphelios was like the champion, like that was all that Cloud9 was playing in 2020, and they were playing really well with it. And I think we'll see a lot of Aphelios priority, therefore a lot of Thresh priority, because I think Vulcan and Core GJ are really good Thresh players, and Thresh is just like the natural pairing with Aphelios. And I think in mid lane, the main champion that I'm looking at is Twisted Fate, because I think Perks recently, his best performances have been on the Twisted Fate, and similar, Jensen's just a really good Twisted Fate player, and we know he can play the champion, and we're also seeing that champ kind of rise in priority. So I think we're going to see a lot of Twisted Fate in this series, and then therefore on the Cloud9 side, I think we're going to then see a lot of top lane and or bot lane dives. And then for Team Liquid, I'm expecting Jensen to go kind of heavy control mage kind of style.
Yeah, I feel like we'll see some Syndra in this one with the buffs
Yeah.
that Syndra got recently.
Or Azir.
Um,
Jensen seems to be like an Azir.
yeah, true. He actually looked really good on it last week. His Azir was kind of nice. I got a little bit of a script for you here. What if it goes to game 5 and then TL is the ones that they pick the Scion, and they cheese with the Scion pick? Wouldn't that be poetic, if you will?
I mean, I
Alfari's
guess,
the
but
one.
but at the same time, like it's clear like that's a pretty practiced strat, so you would think that Cloud9 would know how to play around it.
Yeah, and oh, of course they would. I'm just memeing, but yeah, that wouldn't that be hilarious though?
Well, I mean,
It
Team
doesn't even have
Liquid's
to be Scion. It could be any cheese pick.
they've done it in
And
the
in game
past.
5, TL gets revenge.
Yeah,
That would
maybe.
be that would
But
be interesting.
I think it's only gonna be 4 games, so it's not
Okay,
gonna happen.
so you got C9-3-1. I got C9-3-2. Okay, last question I got for you on this kind of stuff. Who's going to Worlds, JT? We've got it's automatic now that TSM, TL, or C9, one of them cannot go to Worlds automatically due to the bracket. So that's something to throw out. And then same thing on the other side, or just below it on the bracket. Either 100 Thieves, Dig, and EG, one of them cannot make it to Worlds as well. Do you have 3 teams that you think are going to go to Worlds?
It's really hard to say.
It
I mean, I'm
is.
gonna say in a sec, but what I will say is we do have a lot of teams that who previously normally performed very well in the best of fives, like Cloud9 and like Team Liquid. They've had a lot of problems in the regular season, and again, it's best of ones, and I think best of fives are a completely different monster than best of ones. I think people are expecting a bit of an increase in play from Cloud9 and Team Liquid. And on the flip side, we've seen teams like EG and 100 Thieves be very bad in best of fives and not, you know, uh, they don't seem to play very well in best of fives for the most part. But those are 2 teams that are looking very good right now. And like you mentioned, the way that the brackets kind of are aligned, one of C9, TL, TSM is not going to make it, and one of 100 Thieves, EG, and Dignitas is not going to make it. And I think it's pretty obvious that of those in that bracket of EG, 100 Thieves, Dig, I don't think Dig's going to make it. So I think Auto, it's a guaranteed one of EG 100 Thieves and a guaranteed one of the big 3. And if I had to pick right now, I would pick TSM, Cloud9, and
Uh-huh.
100 Thieves.
Okay. Mine is a little bit different. I go TSM, C9, and EG.
So
I
you
think
think
that
that EG will beat You think so? EG
yep,
is going to most likely beat 100 Thieves next round.
that is what I think is going to happen. Yes. God, it's so hard to say, but isn't that like it's actually so exciting? Like, it's so nice that we have so many teams that could win. I literally won't be surprised if any of the top 5 that we've been talking about win the whole split. And I think that that's pretty rare that we get that. And so I don't know. I'm just so excited. But yes, I do think EG is for real. I think they're a good team. Um, yeah, I don't know. I have no real idea, but it is exciting, and that's pretty sweet. So I think
Yeah,
we're lucky on that
I
front.
think the majority of people would peg TSM as well, not a guarantee, but definitely the most likely of all of those 5 teams to make Worlds. But for me, like I just don't have a ton of confidence in TSM. I think a lot of their wins have been kind of sketchy, and I think, although TSM has a really good record against Team Liquid in best of ones, Team Liquid is consistently beating them in the best of fives. I think the main matchup for me is probably going to be that TSM versus Cloud9 matchup in the next series. Obviously, I'm predicting Cloud9 win over Team Liquid in this one, but I definitely agree with you. Like the C9 TL series and the 100T EG series is really just going to like set the scene for the rest of the playoffs. I think those are like the biggest 2 matches outside of finals. Like I could give any fucks about the lower bracket or any of those other matches, but like those 2 are going to be really hype matches.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it should be really interesting. Let's talk real briefly about our eliminated teams. We say farewell to FlyQuest and Counter Logic Gaming. It's been a very, very difficult year for both of these teams, if we're being completely honest. Uh, I guess let's start with FlyQuest. Um, they came into the year with a lot of people actually hyping them up a lot. I do remember there were some analysts saying it's possible that we see FlyQuest as a top 3 team, and this is so Captain Hindsight, but like, wow, oh my god, did that not happen?
I was never
And
one to
sadly,
peg
we
them
just
as like top 3, but like maybe top 5.
what's that? Sorry.
I was never one to peg them as like top 3, but I thought top 5 was like potentially possible.
So I want to be clear that like the people that were saying they could be top 3, we're not saying they think they're top 3. I think it was Emily Rand, and I think she was saying like she believed their ceiling was top 3. So I don't want to be completely disingenuous there, but it's just it goes to show like where the expectations could have been for this team and where they ended up falling was quite bad. I'm pretty sad that FlyQuest didn't really do much this year. I still love the org. I mean, I'm wearing the FlyQuest jersey right now as a little farewell. I still love the org, but honestly, I didn't want them to win this weekend because I didn't want to see them play in playoffs. They are just clearly below Golden Guardians as far as a skill level. So I think it's for the best that FlyQuest didn't move on. But I really hope we see FlyQuest bounce back next year. I want to see FlyQuest get back to where they were last year because I think this org is fucking awesome. I love what they do, and yeah, it's just unfortunate how things ended up. With CLG, on the other hand, a lot more yikes, right?
Yeah, big
Th-
yikes.
There's not a lot of good things to say about CLG, man. I mean,
Is
there's not a lot of
there
good things to say about FlyQuest either, but holy, this was bad.
Broxa is like the only redeeming thing about CLG, and that's it. Nothing else.
Yeah. So I guess okay, let's talk about it this way. If you're GM for CLG, are you keeping any players next year? Are you
I
keeping Broxa?
I think they should keep Broxa because he's a good player, but at the same time I think the whole thing needs a fresh start.
Yeah, I don't mind the argument that they need a complete fresh start. I don't mind that at all. But I also wouldn't mind if they kept Broxa, and here's why. One, I do think that he was their best performing player, so there's that. But I don't know who you're going to. I don't know who you're going to get. Who's going to want to go play for CLG, right? So there's that. And you know that there's a good chance that the community is going to continue to shit on you because you're playing for CLG. And I will say Brox is one of the guys that handles that really well. Even though I think it's still really, really hard on him, I think that no matter what, you're going to get Broxa that comes in with a positive attitude. And I do think that you could still have that fresh start feel, even with keeping Broxa, is what I would say. But
I
of
think
course, it all depends on what your options are. It's difficult to say when we don't know what their options are going to be, right?
that's definitely true. I would also say that I do think that you can either keep or get rid of Broxa. I think both things are completely fine. I would probably be in favor of keeping Broxa, but I do think that if you're going to keep Broxa, the rest of the CLG players have to go because I think they just have like a really terrible stigma attached to them that they are
Mm-hmm.
so bad. And I think when you do have players that kind of continually manage to stay on a team with poor results, that is what kind of creates that like toxic environment and toxic community around the team where it's just so easy to just dump all this hatred into this team because you have players that haven't been playing very well. Like Finn had a pretty bad year, like all around. He had I think a couple of good weeks towards the end of
Horrifyingly bad,
yeah, he had a
honestly.
couple of good weeks at the end of spring split where it looked like okay, maybe he can be like a player to turn this around. Paul
Yeah.
Belter, man, that guy was honestly really bad. Smoothie was pretty bad for the majority of the split, minus a couple weeks where he had some really good games on engagers. I think Wild Turtle was pretty hit or miss for almost the entire split. A little bit more miss than hit. He wasn't absolutely terrible by any means, but he wasn't anything great. And I think, if not for Brox's like openness and like vulnerability, like people would have no empathy for CLG whatsoever.
Yeah, CLG was an absolute nightmare, but they did pick up the win to end the season,
Yeah,
which was
they they
kind of
they
huge.
they helped out Golden Guardians make
Yeah,
playoffs.
they did. They helped out me too. They helped me catch you in our predictions.
Yep, we're tied.
We are officially tied. It took me till the very last week to tie. Okay, one other thing that I wanted to do that I thought would be fun, a little mini game here. I'm going to put you to the test, JNT. There
Okay.
has been 19 players that have played for CLG and FlyQuest combined over the year, which is a lot of freaking players, by the way. I wanted to see if you could name them.
Wait, so there have been 19 players
19
that played
on
for
CLG
CLG and
or
FlyQuest
FlyQuest.
or
Yeah.
FlyQuest.
Well, yeah, they play. I mean, obviously they didn't play on both, right?
No, but you okay.
19 players across both of these lineups for the whole year have played for either FlyQuest or CLG.
Okay, I'll do FlyQuest first.
Okay.
So, okay, Licorice, Jose Diodo, Palafox, Johnson, and Diamond. That's 5.
Yep.
And then you had Kumo, NXI,
Yep.
Triple, Tomo, and Dreams.
Yep.
Another 5, so that's 10.
Mm-hmm.
For CLG, Solo, Finn, what's his name now? Griffin,
Mm-hmm.
that's 3. Broxa, 4.
Yep.
RJS, Pobelter, Wild Turtle, Smoothie. I'm missing 1.
You're
Don't tell
missing
me.
one. You got the hard one. The solo one was the only one that I wasn't sure if you would get.
Don't tell me. FlyQuest, it was all. Did FlyQuest play with any
You've got
different
all the
players?
FlyQuest players. You've got
Yeah.
all the FlyQuest guys. It's a CLG guy. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll move on.
Solo played in lock-in for them. Then Finn played starting week 1. Brock's Wiggly or Griffin played in
Mm-hmm.
lock-in and at the start of the split.
Yeah.
And then Broxa came in like week 3 and then played the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
RJS played
Yep.
for the first, for like lock-in, or no, he didn't play lock-in. Pobelter played lock-in, and then RJS played the first 8 games of the season, so the first 3.5 weeks. And then Pobelter played. Did anyone else play mid?
Dude, people listening to this are screaming right now.
If this is wait, so it's a mid laner?
Maybe.
If you're memeing and it's like, if you're gonna say
I'm
wild
not
turkey.
memeing.
Well, I
I'm
was
not
gonna say if
memeing.
you're gonna say like wild turkey or something, but
No, I'm not memeing. You're just missing.
support. Was it a support? I don't know.
Okay, you're out of time. You didn't say DeMonte.
Oh shit. Yeah, yeah.
Dude, that's why I told you people are screaming. You did really well though. I did not think you were gonna get solo. Uh, yeah, I think you did a pretty good job.
Oh
So
yeah,
I thought that would be
DeMonte
fun to do.
just played.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that funny how like you remember all the ones all the way back in lock-in, but then just a slip of the mind. Yeah, anyways, that was pretty damn good. Good
Trilogy's
job.
so bad, I've tried to erase them from my memory.
Yeah. Let's do Popoff Beansoup now.
Okay,
Do you want me to go first or you want to go first?
you can go first.
I just went with Golden Guardians for the whole summer split. I feel like because it's the end of the split, I feel like it's fitting to go with a team. Uh, guys, they picked up 3 wins in spring, okay, and they picked up like I don't know 11 or something,
11, yeah.
maybe 12. I don't even know in summer. Like what a turnaround. Okay, yes, you had to make some roster swaps, but who cares? This team was an absolute nightmare, and you actually have a playoff spot. Who cares if it's eighth? Like this team can actually take games off of other like decent teams. So I just thought that they deserved it. I think Iconic got so much better. Olive got Blaze Olive got so much better. Stixay got so much better. Even Chime actually has a champion that he looks really good on for the most part. Israel was kind of troll that one week, but for the most part, Israel looks pretty good. Yeah, and then Licorice has what a bounce back from where he was with FlyQuest to Golden Guardians. I just think it's crazy, and I really want to credit a lot of the coaching staff with this because when you have a team that's struggling that hard, it is the coaching staff generally that keeps morale up and keeps a team improving, and just huge turnaround. So I think Popoff absolutely needs to go to Golden Guardians in my mind.
Well, I didn't do it exactly like that. I didn't do like a full split kind of thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
I just went for the weekend, and I gave it to
Hmm.
Blabber because I thought while he wasn't like the one hard carrying Cloud9 in all of their games, I thought his engaging was really, really good the whole week. I thought his Diana game, they were kind of going with the Yasuo Diana Wombo combo in their game against EG. And while I think it kind of took them that one big team fight loss in the mid lane where they got baited by all the stopwatches to sort of figure out how to play, I think from that point onwards, I think Cloud9 actually played really, really well in terms of picking their spots for engages, like starting off an engage, but not using all your cooldowns right at the start to blow other CDs and then make your full-on engage. I thought Blabber specifically did a really good job, and even he had a really good Viego game against Dig on Saturday, and his Xin Zhao against Team Liquid was pretty disgusting. Good guy, gave Sven the Penta. But I thought
Yeah,
Blabber's
true.
engaging specifically was really, really good this week.
Yeah, I have to agree. That's a really good sign for C9 because, well, I mean, let's be honest, Blabber was not very consistent most of the split. And while we did mention that he was getting better as the split went on, I would still say the very late end of the split is where he started to look like himself
Yeah,
again,
the
which
last
is
three
what you
weeks I
need,
think were really, really good for him in
and that's
terms
what
of
you need going into playoffs, right? So that's a good sign for Cloud9. For Beansoup, I went 100 Thieves putting in their academy squad. Now, again, I don't blame them for doing it, but that doesn't make it any less bean soup. Like that game did matter, and it could have looked completely different if it wasn't the case of them putting in their academy squad. So while I don't necessarily agree with it per se, I guess I understand it, and it still just sucked from the viewer's point of view, you know. So bean soup.
Yeah, it actually is really interesting because I think in a world where, let's say, for example, 100 Thieves plays with their main roster and they win that game, we now have Cloud9 versus Dig, winner plays 100 Thieves, and then Team Liquid versus EG, winner plays TSM. And if you kind of look historically, EG has played a lot better against 100 Thieves um, than they do against Team Liquid. Team Liquid actually has a better head-to-head record against
Yeah.
EG this split specifically, and one of the main teams that EG actually couldn't really pick up wins on. But I think should 100 Thieves have played and won that game, I think it would have actually made it a much more difficult road for EG.
Well,
But
and if EG's in the upper part of the upper bracket,
yeah,
they actually have a good record against TSM, I believe. So if they would have won that and moved on to play TSM, you could argue that that would be worse for TSM. It's
yeah,
hard to say, right? There's a bunch of hypotheticals, but we
mhm,
definitely know that it did affect the game. Like, let's be honest.
yeah,
Who knows what would have happened, but you could tell that something changed, and that was kind of bean soup.
yeah. Beansoup, I went with the Mortals.
Yeah,
They looked really bad this week. Like this,
yeah.
I think this was their worst week. I think they had some bad games in other weeks, like that really troll game against TSM where they like hard through, but like all three games this week were really bad.
And I mentioned this to you earlier today, but I'll mention it again. Around week 4 or 5 or something, we talked about how it was EG was the team that like you couldn't rely on, but you couldn't count them out. And it's like And we mentioned how Immortals was also one of those teams, but it's like Immortals is now that team. Like they are the sole team that like you don't know what to expect
Yeah,
out of
like
them. They could
last
actually,
week, they 3-0'd and they
yeah,
looked good.
yeah,
And this week
yeah,
they went 0-3 and looked so bad. Like man,
yeah.
Insanity, he played so bad in their 2 games against FlyQuest and Golden Guardians. Like, dude,
Someone get that guy his juice,
he needs
man.
it badly, dude.
Anyway, yeah, they are pretty bean soup. Uh, is that it before quick news?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do quick news.
We got a lot of small quick news type things, so we'll roll through it quickly, but we got a lot of them. First up, there was a bit of drama early on in the week in the LCO, actually, of all places. Basically where their main caster Rusty, he was casting games between Chiefs and Mammoth, two not so great teams. But
Just
Chiefs,
to clarify, that's the new Australian league for
yeah,
people that,
yeah, the LCO.
yeah, okay,
Pentanet.gg plays there for you people
yeah.
might have heard about us talk about them, but when I was going on. But basically, there's a game this week between two teams. Mammoth's actually the worst team in the league. Chiefs is like a playoff type team, and Chiefs was like 10, 15K gold up for like a period of 10 minutes into the game, and anytime that they would ace the other team, they kind of like refused to end the game and was just like farming waves and taking jungle camps and basing and just like stacking items on them. And the caster was getting kind of pissed off on the broadcast, and then there was a lot of comments about that on Twitter and Reddit, and basically how like I wouldn't call it holding a game hostage, but they kind of were
Oh,
holding
come
a
on,
competitive a
man.
game hostage.
That's holding a game hostage. That's exactly what it was. I loved the clip from the caster because I think it's important to call out that shit. That just sucks, man. It's actually really like it's not good for the fans because the game is just over. It's not good for the team that's getting beat up on. It's really really BM in my opinion. So I'm glad that he was vocal about it. He even said like he's like I know I'm supposed to be impartial, but like this just sucks, and he's right. I completely agree with him. So I'm with the caster on this one. That was stupid. Maybe I should have given that bean soup. Honestly.
Yep. Although I have another bean soup
Oh my
candidate
god.
for
Yeah.
you. There was a bunch of talk on Twitter and clips on Reddit of game in the LPL where Victory Five's jungler accidentally didn't select the summoner spell Smite while playing jungle and had TP, and they weren't allowed to remake the game and get the correct summoner spell.
I watched that game, and just so people that don't know, I don't watch a lot of LPL. In fact, I've barely watched any this summer. I may have watched like 2 Suning games because I'm a Suning fanboy from Worlds, but I finally decided to watch that one, and that's what I have to watch. Like, why? Why?
Oh, and
Why can you not just implement a rule where if a jungler doesn't have smite, it's a remake? Like, that is literally it. Because I saw some people saying on Twitter, like, well, then what if someone accidentally takes heal instead of flash? It's like, okay, well, that's fine. Like, specifically, just smite. I'm sure there's a way that you could write up a rule that it's just a remake. Like, I'm sure there's a way to do that, man, and he got fined 1 month's salary. What bullshit is that? Why is that a thing in the LPL? Why is that allowed? He made a mistake. You shouldn't be fined a month's salary because you accidentally didn't take smite. Like, what kind of a joke is that?
well, one thing that I literally just thought of right now sitting here is
Go ahead.
in the league client, when you play a
Hmm.
game, if
Yeah.
you're in the jungle role,
Yep.
you get auto selected to smite. And I
Yep.
know obviously for competitive they play on Tournament Realm and they play in a custom game where you're not like picking a role per se, but like I feel like maybe like to prevent that, like just implement that into the Tournament Realm client where if you're position 2, you like not that you are forced to take smite, but it'll auto select smite for you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it'll
If
do
you're
it
the
it'll do it
jungle.
like it does in solo queue. Like it'll if you get picked for jungle in solo queue, it'll says your summoner spell has been switched to smite because you are playing jungle. Like just have that in LCS or something, or just in all
Yeah.
tournament realm clients. But it still gives you the option to change it. For example, if you were doing some like role swapping or a player was going to play a different position for whatever reason.
And for those curious, the game did go the way you would think it did. He just got completely out jungled. He was like level 5 to SOFM's like 9 or something. And I think SOFM was even playing Lee Sin. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't remember. But either way, it didn't matter. The game was so slow and boring. You were just waiting for the game to end. And not to mention, it's also Victory 5, who was 0 12 or 0 13 at the time. Like, I even tweeted like, of course it would have to happen to the worst team in the league that doesn't have a win yet. Like naturally, it would have to happen. Like that's a mistake that technically could happen to anyone, right? But naturally, it had to be them.
Yeah, I mean, just for the people who like really don't know how bad that is, like if you don't play jungle, like if you don't take smite, that means you can't take the smite item, which allows you to get bonus XP off of monsters and deal extra damage to monsters and get a little bit of lifesteal off of monsters, which actually allows you to play the jungle role. Like
Yeah, you
if
don't hit level 2
yeah,
off
you
of your
don't hit
first camp.
two, you don't do enough damage to the camps, and you don't get any of the like bonus healing from the camps from the little smite items.
Yeah, the jungle minions just beat the living
It's
hell out of
just
you.
GG.
He was having trouble clearing Krugs as well, like that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah,
where he picks up one of the big Krugs and then has to base because the little Krugs will beat his ass.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how that went.
All
Okay,
right.
we've been going on about this enough. What's next?
Yeah, well, this was actually really interesting that I was not expecting. Uzi, that's right, RNG Uzi, is gonna launch an esports team for Wild Rift, which is League's mobile game.
Poggers.
Yeah, it kind of just makes complete sense because he's like a Chinese League icon, and Wild Rift was pretty much designed for the eastern part of the world because of how much, mobile gaming is. It's just so big out there. So I feel like it's kind of like a
Mm.
match made in heaven for like Chinese League of Legends biggest star to make a team for their mobile game.
Yeah, it's Uzi. Literally, like you said, the biggest star that the LPL has ever had. Honestly, he is
Yeah.
your Bjergsen of the LCS for
You're
people that
faker.
don't know. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't really have much else to say on it. Cool.
A couple of weeks ago, we talked about a lot of the T1 coaching staff changes, and their former head coach, Daney, is returning to Dam1 because he was previously on the Dam1 coaching staff when they won Worlds. He's going back to Dam1 as a strategic analyst, so he's going to be giving them that inside knowledge about T1.
Yeah, that's what my first thought was. Is like, what if these teams end up playing each other in the playoffs? He's got all the info
Hmm.
on T1. That was the first thing that I thought of. Yeah,
Yeah.
really interesting there.
Next up, as most of you would have noticed, obviously, LCS was online again. But the LCS did put out a statement before week 9 that even though that they were going back online, that they want to try to get they want to try to get players back in the studio for playoffs. There's been no word on that yet, but as of right now, the plan is that they will be playing in studio for playoffs. Hopefully, the COVID issues have kind of subsided and we can get them teams back in there.
Yeah, let's hope so. Hopefully.
Um, Next up, kind of a out of left field thing, kind of a bit of a scary situation, was Arnold, who is Gen G's CEO, on Twitter a couple of days ago, basically saying how there was a bit of a scare at the Gen G facility out in Korea, that there was a guy with a gun trying to get into the building.
I'm just gonna say, if people think TSM fans are crazy,
Yeah,
maybe LCK, is just on a whole nother level. I don't know. That shit's messed up.
weird champ. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. What's next?
Next up, more Eastern stuff. IG, yes, Invictus Gaming, yes, world champion Invictus Gaming. They did not make LPL playoffs. They actually are like 13th right now in the LPL
Yeah, I
standings.
watched. I watched one of their series. They look like dog shit.
Yeah, and the rumors are that most likely Rookie and the Shy are going to retire at the end of the year. So it's kind of basically probably the last time we'll ever see them. That's what the rumor is, at least, that both of them are going to retire. Kind of a fall from grace, honestly, with
Not the way you
IG.
want to see it happen, right?
Yeah, it's like imagine if like Faker was like eighth place LCK and like then retired. Like that'd be so bad.
So here's what I'll say about it. Like it does feel bad when you see like iconic players like that have their careers come to an end on such an unfortunate note. But like one thing that I've realized with League is like it's just not like traditional sports where you get that, hey, I'm retiring, and like sometimes like retirement's just not even on purpose. Like even if you are an absolute star, like Sneaky, like technically kind of retired, right? But it wasn't by his own choice.
Yeah,
Same thing with guys like Medios and like it's just retirement is so not a normal thing when it comes to League of Legends. There's so many players that retire and then come out of retirement as well. It's like it's so bizarre, and it is a little bit unfortunate that like you don't get that kind of closure that you would get in a traditional sport where like, you know, I don't know what's a good example. Like Wayne Gretzky when he retires, like it's like a momentous thing. It just doesn't work the same way, which kind of sucks, I guess.
Yeah. All right.
But anyway,
Last but not least, actually, I'm kind of glad I'm about to say this. New champion, Akshan, is going to be disabled at Worlds, which is a good
Pog.
thing because I
Yep.
think all the new champions are generally, for the most part, broken. Although I do think that Akshan is a little bit on the weak side, mainly just due to his win rate and his, I think, 2 different hotfix buffs that he's gotten. I think the champ is still on the weak side. But on the flip side, I think if you were to take this to competitive, I still think it would somehow manage to be absolutely bonkers broken, simply due to the revive mechanic. I think
Well, and we're
pro players are obviously good enough to
yeah.
to min max the champion and not like int, because I think the main problem with the champ is like people are finding it really hard to like actually get in and do damage and use a little wall hook shot and figure out how to use it properly. Because from what I've been hearing, the champion's pretty clunky with that spell, and like it doesn't, the inputs don't feel right, and there's some problems with this passive in terms of the double shot and how it interacts with minions and whatnot. So it just seems like there's a lot of little problems with this champion, and on top of there being like a potentially game changing ability with the revive and competitive, I'm glad that we're not going to see this champ.
Well, and how far away are we from the Worlds patch though? Because isn't there
Well,
still a chance that Akshan could get buffed and then could be perma banned?
I
Like
mean,
on
maybe.
red side, like you just have to ban him. Like we saw when they reworked Pantheon, red side had to ban him every time because he was that broken. Like that old chestnut.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a chance, but he's not going to be played, so
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Which is a good thing. Now I added one. Sorry, JNT. I do that sometimes.
Damn
I
troll.
added one. Yeah, I got him. Big time troll. Epic troll. Uh, Riot is taking a week break as of today. Today was August 2nd, which I think is kind of a cool thing. I mean, I guess it sucks for people that really want to patch, but I respect it. I think it's good to give your employees a break. And so if people are wondering what the hell's going on, I guess patches are pushed back a week or something like that.
I do remember seeing
Um,
that on Reddit, said they were taking a break.
yeah, which is kind of cool. I think 100 Thieves did something like that as well. Maybe it was just for their social team. I don't remember, but you see a lot of organizations, or I guess in this case, companies, doing that where they give a full break to their to their employees, which I think is cool. So I just think that that's a cool little progressive thing. That is very 2021, honestly. But I think it's
Yeah,
a good thing to recognize that your mental health of your employees is important. And well, God knows Riot needs some points in the good, I don't know what the good bucket, whatever. Anyways, some good things coming out of Riot, so
they
I
need some
just
juice in
respect
that
that.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. But that is all. That is all for this week. Yeah, we apologize again for not knowing when we're gonna do live shows and stuff like that. But like we said, every week we're gonna continue to try to push out these episodes and get them to you guys as soon as possible, despite the fact that JNT is going around the world in 80 days.
Good
But we
movie.
thank you guys for sticking with us. And I also want to shout out you, JNT, for being able to do this anyways, for finding ways to run the recording and the
I
stream and
do
all
it for
that
the
stuff from
people.
wherever the hell you are. What's that?
I do it for the people.
Yeah, he's a man of the people. Mayor JNT, kissing babies. Anyways. All right, remember to hit the subscribe button, guys. We will see you guys next week. Any other shoutouts, JNT?
No,
Close it for us.
this has been, what episode is this? 53?
Episode 53 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Goodbye.